This video was produced in 1997 by the Gladstone Regional Art Gallery and Museum as part of the first major Ruby Campbell retrospective exhibition and features narration by Heather Stewart, Ruby's niece and the owner of Kilburnie Homestead.
Now, we've come in past the old fig tree and up the driveway, and now we're coming down towards the Kilburnie house, and over here we have the graves of Auntie Ruby's father and mother, John and Elizabeth Campbell. Now we're looking at the grave here at Kilburnie of Walter Pasley, who was a travelling tutor, but he was also an artist, and he taught the older Kilburnie children, but he died in September 19, 1888, and although this was before Auntie Ruby was born, he left behind some watercolours which she greatly admired, and she did say that he was the one who more or less influenced her and awoke her interest in art. And now we're looking at the pine tree with the Kilburnie house in the background, and over on the right-hand side are the sheds. That was the old saddle shed. We're looking at it from this top side here, and the next one over is the old machinery shed. We're looking at the Kilburnie homestead now. Now the lower part in the front there was the original homestead, which was built in 1883. But it was damaged by white ants soon afterwards, so it was rebuilt again, using the same slabs which we'll see later on the other side. The part in the background was added around the turn of the century. Well, Auntie Ruby had it painted red, probably many, many years ago, so when we had the house repainted, it was done once again in the same colour red. The part you see over there with the white and the ghastly pink on, that's got to be redone because we had some boards that were rotting there and they were replaced. We're now going to enter the house via the kitchen. We're now in the Kilburnie kitchen, and as you can see, of course, it's being used right up to the present day. This part we're looking at was the original fireplace, and later on used as a stove recess with an old wood stove in there. And then over here we have an original piece of kitchen furniture which would have been used, much the same as what is being used there today. The galvanised iron behind it, the ceiling with the ceiling boards removed, round onto the slab part of the kitchen. One of Auntie Ruby's older sisters, Rachel, married, and she went to live in Canada. And very sadly, during the around the 1919, I think it was, there was an outbreak of flu, very, very bad flu, and Rachel and her husband died within days of each other, leaving behind 4 young children. And grandfather travelled to Canada, and he returned with the children, and 3 of them were reared here on Kilburnie. We're looking at stenciling on top of these walls. This was done by Auntie Ruby, and possibly Auntie may have helped. But it's a Japanese theme, and grandfather did go to, Auntie Ruby's father did go to Japan, so possibly this stenciling was as a result of that trip. We're looking at this small room we're looking at now. It was the maid's room. That's the window that we're looking at. And there's an old piece of furniture down there made out of a box of some description. And over here, this is the walkway between the kitchen and the dining room. And of course all meals in those days were served in the dining room, and they had to be carried from the kitchen, so hence the covered walkway. If it was raining, probably did in those days, and would have had it covered. Now we're in the dining room, and also in here is sort of a library. I guess this is where they came in to read. Quite a lot of books, they were good readers. And here we have the dining room table, which would probably comfortably seat 12 at any one time. And it has a slab floor, original slab floor. Now we're in the office here, And originally there used to be a red cedar writing desk, which we'll see later on upstairs. It sat there. Right, now we're upstairs and we're in the living room, and we're actually looking at some of the photographs. The one we're looking at now is Auntie Ruby's father, John Campbell. And then we move across to her mother, Elizabeth Campbell. We have stenciling around up near the ceiling, which was obviously done by the girls, probably by Auntie Ruby. And now looking at the piano stool, which Auntie Ruby poker worked quite intricately. Quite a lovely piece. Yes, this piece would have been made on the property too, and she decorated with the poker work. We're looking at this small table now, which was obviously made here on Kilburnie by Auntie Ruby and Sister May, and then Auntie Ruby later decorated the top of it. Now we're in the main bedroom upstairs, and we're looking at one of Auntie Ruby's watercolours on the wall that she had actually thrown away, and I had it framed. And this piece of furniture would have been handmade by the girls and then decorated by Auntie Ruby. This was another one, which is also made by them. And as you can see on this one, they've actually painted tiles. And this is one of the original beds, the iron bed heads. We're looking at the blanket box or glory box that Auntie Ruby extensively decorated. This was also made on Kilburnie by the girls with the aid of the carpenter, the bush carpenter. And now we're looking at another bookcase, once again extensively decorated, made by the girls and extensively decorated. We're now looking at this rather lovely wardrobe, which was made by the girls, and then Auntie Ruby did the very, very fine poker work. And there's an awful lot of work that's gone into this one. Quite lovely. It seems with this particular one that Auntie Ruby was influenced by the pre-Raphaelite artist Moore. And we call this one, we've nicknamed, well, Bettina Macaulay has nicknamed this wardrobe Summer and Music, which I think is quite nice. This is the red cedar writing desk that lived downstairs in the old office that we saw earlier, but we've had it moved up here so that Fiona can use it. And we have here the studio, which is an illustrated magazine of fine and applied art, and this one's dated December 15, 1914. We're now in one of the four corner rooms that were obviously bedrooms for the children, and we're looking at the stencil. The stenciling has been done around this one in green. Now I'm just coming from the eastern veranda of the house upstairs here, and round these little corner pathways, I guess. There's four corner rooms on Kilburnie, and each one there's a little passageway left where you can get through. In another of the corner rooms, and this one we presume, I'm quite sure, was Auntie Ruby's room when she was a young girl. And once again the extensive stenciling. This once again, this was one made by the girls. Now Auntie Ruby was a terribly keen gardener, and these concrete beds that we're looking at, she actually made herself. In the background is a fruit tree. Right, now we're standing on what was the original tennis court here at Kilburnie, on the eastern side, and we're looking at the house, and that red portion you can see is one of the corner rooms, and then we move across the veranda, and that netting and those two posts that you can see there are part of the old original tennis court fence, which is now falling down, but which will be done up again. Now we're now looking at the fig tree, which featured in some of Auntie Ruby's pencil drawings. We're in the Kilburnie stockyards now, and we're looking at an old tree that might be or might not be one that Auntie Ruby did draw, or similar to one that Auntie Ruby drew. I think it's a messmate tree. Now we're viewing the cliff area from the Kilburnie, towards the Kilburnie house. Now this was a very, very popular site for Auntie Ruby. She did quite a lot of painting of these. Now we're coming round with two big old glue guns here, There actually were three that she did quite a nice watercolour of, and one of them fell over, died, fell over, so there's two remaining, but they're the original trees. Now, if you'd been a visitor coming on the coach from Gladstone in the late 1890s, early 1900s, this possibly is the view that you would have seen. The coach would have come down from this direction and then would have travelled in along this, like an avenue with these mango trees, and down to the Kilburnie house, which was Kilburnie was also a horse changing station for the coach. Now we're looking at the old pepperina tree, which probably featured in quite a few of Auntie Ruby's pencil sketches, and one that springs to mind is the one with the old dray, and the pepperina tree was in the background of this one. And this is the harness shed, and then we're coming round to focus on the blacksmith shop, which did feature in a lot of Auntie Ruby's work, whether it be etchings or pencil sketches.
But firstly this evening I'd like to acknowledge some special guests that we have with us, and as our guest of honour this evening we have Heather Campbell Stewart, the niece, I was going to say niece, the niece of Ruby Campbell, and she'll share her recollections.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Now we're gathered here tonight to view the work of Ruby Campbell the artist, but I'd like to talk a little bit about my Auntie Ruby the person. She was born at Kilburnie on the 8th of December 1888, and she arrived into the world shortly before midnight. Now much to her delight later in life, her twin sister Beryl arrived after midnight, thus making her birthday the 9th of December. Auntie Ruby was officially one whole day older than her sister. Now, of course, in those days there was no Villa Wheeler, and naturally no medical aid of any kind, so the twins were brought into the world by their father, John Campbell. Now, the two little girls arrived into a family of two older brothers and three older sisters, and one of these, May, was to play quite an important part in Auntie Ruby's life. Now, the older Campbell children received their schooling at home on Kilburnie with the aid of tutors, and one of these tutors was Walter Paslett. He was also an artist, and he was a travelling tutor, and although Auntie Ruby never really met him, he was the one that more or less started her interest in art. He left behind several watercolours at Kilburnie which she greatly admired. Now, although she would have had a tremendous amount of work and many duties to perform, we now know that she actually took up some interest in art. She embarked on a course, a correspondence course, with the School of Applied Art at Battle Creek, Michigan, USA, from which she received her diploma in commercial illustrating, dated July 29, 1915. In the early 1920s, she travelled to Melbourne to begin studying art, but I believe this was fairly short-lived because she was needed at home. So she willingly and cheerfully returned to Kilburnie to take up yet another duty, that of joint foster mother to three of the older sister's four young children. In 1928, Auntie Ruby received yet another blow when she lost her sister and long-time companion May. She passed away suddenly. For in the early 1930s, she commenced etching under the guidance of John Shirlow, and all this was done by correspondence. She was a very, very active lady, but she never really lost her interest in art, and in 1972, at the age of 83, she had her first exhibition in Rockhampton, and the reports were quite glowing. She passed away in Villa Wheeler in November 1977. Now, Auntie Ruby belonged to the Calais Valley. She was born there, she lived her whole life there, and she died there. And much of the work we see here tonight depicts scenes from her beloved Kilburnie. She witnessed many changes in the area, and she moved to the times without question. She was cheerful, she was well-read, and could converse on any subject. She did the work of a man, yet remained completely feminine and always a lady. She likely enjoyed the finer things in life, but above all, she remained strong and steadfast, and she never lost sight of her goals. In my eyes, anyway, she was quite a remarkable woman.
And tonight, with much pleasure, sense of joy and celebration and being able to support this wonderful exhibition of work. And ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of our supporters, those who are pleasant to declare this exhibition to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you now please put your hands together for all those very special